Welcome everyone. Happy Pride Month. Welcome to the Blade Pride Chat presented by the Leonard-Litz LGBTQ Foundation. We are streaming live on the social channels of the Washington Blade and Los Angeles Blade. And boy, do we have a treat for you today. We have four amazing panelists. Amazing. And that's an understatement. Four amazing panelists representing the Black and Asian American Pacific Islander, otherwise known as the AAPI LGBTQ community. I want to quickly introduce our panelists and give them an opportunity to share just a little bit about themselves. I mean, we could go on and on and on about the movement building work and activism of each of these individuals, but we want to give you a little bit of flavor, and I want to kick it off with the Jasmine Canick, streaming in from Los Angeles. Jasmine, welcome.
Hi everyone. I don't know where to start. Uh, a lot of people call me an activist. I don't consider myself an activist. I work in politics. I've worked in Congress for 5 mayors. I'm sitting here in LA right now, trying to figure out how to get the next progressive city attorney elected. So that's my background. I work in politics. In my younger years, I was one of the co-founders of the National Black Justice Coalition, and I was very involved with a lot of the Black prides that took place around the country, particularly ATB, which a lot of people should remember, which was the big beach party here in Los Angeles. And so that's me. I'm political. I'm still a journalist. I also write. I got a buck sitting in jail now. We waiting on that trial to start. That's my other passion. But I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. So thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Nick, Casey, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to share this space with you all and talk about very important things that we need to discuss. Coincidentally, Jasmine is we've never met in person, but she's the reason why I got vaccinated. So thank you so much. Yeah, your newsletter helped me get the vaccination because I was like dying to get it because I had deficiency. And because of your email, I was able to go to the place. So thank you for that. My name is Nick Casey. As I said, I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm the founder of Nick Casey Footwear, the first first gender-free footwear and accessories company, as well as the creator and executive producer for Equality Fashion Week, which is the first LGBTQ-focused fashion week in LA. Hopefully one day nationally and globally. So thank you so much. As far as activism, I think that I utilize fashion and also just my visibility and existence as activism. So thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. June, welcome. June Crenshaw.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much to the Washington Blade for inviting me to this conversation. I feel so honored to be here amongst all these brilliant activists and individuals. My name is June Crenshaw. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am the executive director of the Wanda Alston Foundation. We provide shelter to LGBTQ queer youth that are experiencing homelessness in the Washington, D.C. area. We've been around for about 13 years. Our organization was started by Black and brown trans women that saw, the impact of homelessness and the impact of discrimination and rejection on our youth long before it was sexy and long before there was funding to go with it and long before everyone was jumping into the space to serve and care for our youth. And so we're proud of our legacy around that. During the pandemic, we were privileged, I don't know if privilege is the right word, but we were in a space where we could open our second location, and we did that extending our services to up to 6 years because the city knows that 18 or 24 months for our youth to recover from rejection and discrimination is oftentimes not enough. And now we're thrilled to be opening yet a third location that focuses on trans men of color. And this is the brainchild of my amazing operations director, who's a trans Black man who experienced homelessness, who saw that there were lots of programs out there that really didn't include him when they were being thought of or being formed. And so we're thrilled to be able to be a part of that. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, talking about pride and, kind of talking about the balance of privilege and non-privileged individuals, which I work with all the time, is it's a good conversation to be having. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
We're excited to have you. Thank you, June. And Nicholas L. Hatcher, welcome.
Hey, y'all. It's so good to be here. Thank you. And to the Washington Blade and LA Blade for having me as well. And I guess for the purposes of this conversation, to keep things easy, you can call me Nicholas. I use he and they pronouns, and I'm also based in the Washington, D.C. area, though I'm originally from North Carolina. I currently serve as the political chair for API Careers United for Action, or AQUA DC, which is how I kind of got connected to this space. And I'm super honored to be in conversation with you all, and I'm really excited to hear more from everyone here. I guess I also don't call myself an activist. I think I'm really just a person with probably too many opinions and too big of a mouth to keep shut. But I've always been really passionate about creating systems that actually work for people of color with intersectional experiences, especially queer and disabled people. So excited to talk more about how this intersects with pride and kind of all the great ideas everybody has.
Well, thank you for that. And with that, let's go ahead and launch into our discussion. We heard Nick mention, really credit Jasmine for getting his COVID vaccine. And we've heard a number of our panelists already sort of, talk about, this Pride season. And I want to ask you all, what does Pride mean to you? We've had a hell of a year, pandemic like we've never seen in 100 years. And we've experienced a lot of loss. We've witnessed a lot of loss. We've seen a lot over the course of the past year. And so I feel it only fitting to begin this conversation humbly by asking each of you, what does this Pride season, what does it mean to you? June, you want to kick us off?
That's an excellent question. And, it brings up so many emotions for me. I'm obviously thrilled at where we are now with the rollout of the vaccination and the fact that most cities around the country are reopening. I'm thrilled about that because I saw the impact of isolation and the shutdown, the impact that it's had on Black and Brown individuals, especially those that are, frontline workers experiencing homelessness, disadvantage in any way. And so the ability to reconnect community and to come out and celebrate and hug and be touched and all of those basic things is just so thrilling. I'm also just, really, like you mentioned, mourning the loss of all that we've suffered over the year plus, loss of friends, loss of freedom, all of those things are heavy on my heart. And the recovery road, particularly for poor Black and Brown individuals is going to be long and hard. And so, it's complicated. I'm thrilled about it to one degree, but also annoyed about conversations that are being had around whether I should return to work or not, or can I continue to work remotely? I mean, that's a privilege that not all of us experienced, right? There were people, that didn't have the privilege of staying safely in their space and staying home and not exposing themselves and keeping their pod really secure. For a lot of us, that didn't occur during this pandemic. And so how do we rest the souls that have been really the infrastructure of keeping the basic things running, now that everyone else is ready to energetically come back? So it's complicated, but I'm certainly glad that we're here.
Nick, what does this Pride season mean to you? I mean, over the course of the past year, as I mentioned, we have seen a lot, experienced a lot, including the effects of what has been a twin pandemic of COVID-19 and the pandemic of racial injustice that we've seen manifest as anti-Black racism and anti-Asian racism and violence as well. What does this Pride season mean to you in light of all those things?
Well, I think June used the perfect word, which is it's complicated. And I feel like this was something that I literally was thinking about just 2 days ago on the 1st of June, because it was the kickoff of Pride Month. And as I was trying to figure out what to post, one of the things that I've become very mindful of increasingly so since last year with the pandemic is to be very present and very transparent in when I do post socially, right? Before, I think we kind of fell into a culture where we kind of lost sight and we just were trying to like content. But I think that COVID, and actually was sick with COVID and very, very sick, very ill for a very long time and living in isolation alone. Very scary, right? But it really helped me put things in perspective because you just have a lot of time in bed to think about things and reflect. And so when it came to Pride this year, I really sat with myself to like reflect on my feelings. And it was just a flush of complicated thoughts and emotions, right? Because on one hand, I feel prouder than ever because one, we have an administration that treats us like humans and believes in us and sees us as valid and is trying to do hopefully their best to try to provide us with the rights and the protections that we so rightly deserve, right? And comparatively, I think the last 4 years before that, every Pride was more of a battle, of a fight, it was much more. It was harder to feel proud. It was because it felt more like I have to do this, I have to do that. This year I felt like I feel more proud. One, because I'm alive. Two, we've made it this far. We have all the support. But then it actually gave me kind of an awareness of seeing what was around me, and all of a sudden there was this increase in support for the LGBTQ community. And I'm seeing it everywhere. And part of me felt so happy, but then it also made me wonder how much of it is performative, like how much of it was because we have an administration that's supportive. So therefore more people feel able to be more out with their support, or is it like just, going back to the commercialism of everything, right? So I feel like Pride is very conflicting for me, but on the other hand, I also feel really excited because I think this is the start of the next phase for our movement, and for our culture and community. And that I think COVID hopefully has brought us closer together. And with all the increase in violence against, both the Black and Asian communities, I feel like it's bringing us together. And the fact that we're even here having this conversation together is proof positive of that, right? So I'm very grateful. I think maybe Pride for me this year is not just complicated, but it's filled with gratitude.
Thank you for that. Jasmine, almost a year ago today, in Los Angeles, folks were preparing for LA Pride. It was in the midst of the pandemic. It was still in the aftermath, the aftershock of the George Floyd murder, and we saw Black Lives Matter activists and other activists sort of organizing a pride celebration like some of us hadn't seen before in Los Angeles. I don't know what the plans are for this year, but I'm interested to learn, what does this Pride season mean for you?
Oh, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but I'm not a pride person. I'm just not a pride person. After, doing 10, 15 years of organizing prides, I feel like generationally, like my time is kind of past a little bit. It's interesting because I'm the keynote speaker for Compton Pride, which I accepted because I'm from Compton. So of course I'm gonna go to Compton and speak to my people. To the extent that I care about prides, I care about inclusiveness and equality. So what I see is that a lot of sort of the white prides get all of the sponsorship money and the support, and the prides that represent people of color, the Black prides, the Latinx prides, the AAPI prides, the other prides don't get as much support. And Black prides, for as much as people talk about Black Lives Matter and rah Black people, they get hardly no support. And so, if we're going to talk about pride, those are the things that concern me. It's like, I don't need lip service. The community doesn't need lip service. When I think about pride, I think about generational work, right? I think about the generation before me and the generation that came before them, and the work that those generations did to make it easier for me, right? For my generation to do what we did. And what we did made it easier for millennials and Gen Zers, and they're going to do the same for the generations that come after them, right? So when I look at Pride, when I look at the celebrations, and I, see a lot of younger people out there celebrating, I'm happy for them. They are probably living their best life for generations like, maybe baby boomers and maybe some of the older Gen Xers. It's kind of interesting because they didn't grow up in a time where they had pride celebrations and they could just, be all of who they wanted to be in their fabulous self. But in 2021, we've made a lot of progress, right? And so that's a good thing. But I still think that we have some issues that we need to work out in our community. That came up last year with CSW, and sort of a little bit of tension there because for so many years, the focus in LA has always been on CSW, when we have all these other prides that happen in LA that get ignored. So, and then personally, one of the reasons why I don't care that much about Pride is because I live in downtown LA. So every day I get to pass by all the queer homeless youth. Every day I get to see all of the unhoused Black people. Even though we make up less than 10% of the city, we make up like 50% of the unhoused people in this city. So when I think about celebrating, who I go to bed with or who I identify as versus some of the more real world things in terms of housing, food, medical care, that kind of ranks low on my list. And I look at it more as one of those first worldly privileged things that we get to do. So that's sort of and again, that's why I started off by saying I'm more political. Like that's sort of where I'm at with things in my life at this point. I'm an exennial, so I'm a little bit older, so I look at things a little bit different. But I'm not hating on Pride. It's just not, I just think that we still have some work that needs to be done. And it's not just all about partying, because I guarantee you the queer youth on Skid Row aren't going to Pride. They're not going to be able to go to Pride, any Pride celebration. And what are we doing for them? Those are the people I'm concerned about.
It's a great point, and thank you for making it. And it's a reminder that Pride and celebrating community, celebrating our resilience, and investing in the resilience of others isn't just something that should happen for the month of June, but it's something that we should do every day throughout the year. And so, point well taken. Nicholas, tell us, what does this Pride season mean to you?
Yeah, I know, Jasmine, it's funny that you mentioned that you're an exennial, because I'm a zennial, I guess. And I am honestly on a lot of the same page as you. I think the season is complicated, but it's also it feels the same way that it felt last year. It feels the same as like when we trace the historical roots. I know this year it's like, a lot of us are celebrating opening up, but when for a lot of Asian Americans and Asians who live in America, like a lot of us have connections back in our mother countries, or however you want to call it. It's weird that we gender countries like that. But like, for example, one of my friends in Thailand does not have access to vaccine. And he actually got COVID last week because like nobody that he knows has access to vaccines. And so when we talk about like, while the US has finally accepted that like we can't be enforcing restrictions over vaccines, there's still so much work to be done globally around who can access the vaccine. In the disability community as well, so many disabled folks literally can't get the vaccine because they're immunocompromised, and the vaccines just actually don't work on them. And so how are we making sure, as like New York rolls out this like vaccine passport app and stuff like that happens, that like those of us who can't get vaccines aren't left behind? And so many of us are queer, right? And so what can Pride Month mean when people are still in the pandemic, But then also, like, when I think about Pride, I always think back to Stonewall. And like, Stonewall was significant for so many reasons. But I mean, literally, it was like people finally, like, not finally, as if they weren't doing it before, but it was a very significant moment where people claimed their power that was being held from them and took it back into their own hands to protect themselves, to protect their communities, to fight back against police brutality. And so as we enter June and eviction moratoriums are lifting and people are starting to be evicted again by police and people are continuing to be deported, like for me, like Pride in this moment means like us as a community, like claiming our power again and like fighting back against these other forms of violence that we don't really talk about as much. And so when we think about Pride and we think about taking action for our community and claiming power for our community, like what are we doing to, like Jasmine said, show up for those youth on Skid Row who aren't able to celebrate right now and don't have like the security necessary to be celebratory right now. And as the summer continues, I think that problem is going to get much worse, not just for homeless youth, but also just the so many people who haven't been able to work and haven't been able to earn an income and haven't qualified for stimulus payments over the past year, who like are facing eviction now and facing debt now. And how are we as a community going to show up for those of us who are in those situations this month? So that's what I'm thinking about.
Thank you for that. And I really want to build off of that, the whole idea of showing up for one another. And, a number of folks that may be streaming this may not be aware of sort of the history of solidarity between Black and AAPI communities. Nick, I'm hoping that you can orient us a little bit to the history of work in solidarity between our communities, and share your thoughts on how folks celebrating Pride, not just this month, but celebrating Pride throughout the year, can show up more consistently, more prominently in solidarity, with BIPOC communities across the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant, so I'm an immigrant. I was born in Hong Kong. I'm trans, non-binary, queer, um, and I grew up with a lot of discrimination and hate, and was bullied as a child. When I moved to New York, I was 7 years old, and I had to learn the language, not only Mandarin but also English, right? Um, because Hong Kong, my native language was Cantonese, just FYI. And I think that in the recent past half a year, I've had a lot of time to have a lot of these discussions as we increase our visibility and having these discussions together, right, with our BIPOC siblings. And I've really thought a lot about my experience as a child and this the intersectionalities of who I am and what is this relationship that the AAPI have with our black siblings, right? And I think what I really came down to realize for myself, and this is my own personal opinion, based on my experience, was even as a child, I was bullied by other immigrants, other minorities, and predominantly they were black and brown. And I never really thought about racism in that way. I just know that it was like ingrained culturally in me, right? And I think like in finally accepting and recognizing that like we live in a white supremacist country, that all of us who are not white have just been trying to like get by and just live and survive. And so it becomes, even at the age of childhood, very easy to vent our frustrations onto someone else who's also at the bottom of the totem pole. And I think that's when I realized like, so I've been carrying around this racism even within myself because of the way I've been conditioned by a white supremacist society. And so once I realized that, that's when I've just really been confronting those feelings and accepting my own issues and working on those and having these conversations and not being afraid, because for the longest time I was afraid to talk to my black siblings and friends about these things because I always felt like I had to be quiet about it. And then I realized like that's exactly what white supremacist society has been trying to condition me to feel, so I can stay quiet, so I don't retaliate and and advocate. And this whole idea of model minority, that's exactly where that comes from. And once I started having these conversations and raising questions and not being afraid to speak my truth, that's when I feel like I started to grow and learn, and not only for me but other people, and we're learning and growing with each other. So once again, just really being grateful to be in this space, and that exponentially has now helped me hopefully be better, and hopefully can pass that on every time I'm able to talk on any kind of platform or space.
Nicholas, do you have any thoughts on how the folks that are streaming this conversation, how we can all do a better job at showing up for one another, showing up in solidarity, and quite frankly, giving a damn about where there are parallel struggles and where there are distinct struggles, and where we can do our part to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. I always come back to that quote, and I'm doing the person who said it a great disservice because I know that they're a person that deserves to be named and recognized. So if any of you know who said this, then say it. But the whole thing where it's like, if you're here to save me, like, don't even bother. But if you're here because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let's walk forward together. And I totally paraphrase that, but that's really like what I come back to in terms of solidarity. Like, so much of these struggles are like intertwined because they're all rooted in white supremacy. And so advocating for ourselves and advocating for each other as we advocate for ourselves is like often a way to really advance solidarity in a meaningful way. I think some of the most beautiful examples of these kind of collaborations I've seen in like my personal work have been like especially in the immigration space. Like I know Undocu Black and NACASEC, the National Asian or National Associate. I don't know. NACASEC is a long acronym, but there. But NACASEC is originally a Korean American advocacy organization, but now works with a broad range of AAPI communities. But NACASEC and Undocu Black have done a lot of great collaborations on immigration justice. And so there are so many examples where people got together, not because anybody was like interested in charity, not because anybody was, I don't know, like trying to be some like, you know, like savior swooping in to save the day. It was because a bunch of really messy, complicated people realized that like they were all like worth having liberation, and they decided that they were going to work together to do it. And I think that's how we should be approaching solidarity work moving forward, is not like, you know, to be human is to cause harm. Everyone has been harmed and everybody is causing harm to each other. But then like having the courage to step back and say like, oh yeah, this system is pushing us all to do this. And now that we all recognize this, we can join forces to break it, because we don't have to live like this. We can have the courage to dream of a system where we aren't like pitted against each other, where we're not fighting over resources. We know we have enough housing. We know we have enough food. We know we have enough water. So why are we fighting over these things? And so, yeah, I kind of just like rambled a little bit, but I guess that's my take.
No, and we appreciate your take. And with that, you know, I want to touch on a few hot topics with the remaining time that we have. You know, June Crenshaw, you have been a part of the Human Rights Campaign board for a long time and very active on LGBTQ issues for an even longer time. You know, one of the major issues, one of the major federal issues is the Equality Act. It's passed out of the House of Representatives. It's currently sort of stalled at the moment in the Senate. You know, do you have any predictions about what may become of the Equality Act? And even more than that, what is it that HRC is doing? What is it that we can all do to help push the Equality Act over the finish line?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I'm the person for the predictions. My hope is that we will do the things that both Nicholas and Nick referred to, and that's realizing that we're all in this together, and that we need to work collaboratively and inclusively to get everything over the finish line, and not just those things that impact us personally, but those things that impact our brothers and sisters and our neighbors. And we need to work as diligently on those items as if, you know, we are, it's for our own direct benefit. So that's, you know, certainly my hope. You know, we have what I hope is the best opportunity to get this through, like an opportunity that we've not had for a while. And I'm hopeful that the work, you know, will stay focused, and that we can get it there. One of the things that Nick referred to was, you know, around our sometimes tendency to pit ourselves against each other, really to work against our own best interest in times. And my hope is that, you know, we've grown and we've seen what a real harmful administration can do to very vulnerable populations, and we just, you know, can't tolerate that in any form. And so, you know, my hope is that we do the hard work, that we stay committed, that we support, you know, getting all of this legislation passed, and And we donate to the organizations that have been doing the work, the grassroots organizations that have been elevating these conversations, locally and nationally. And, I'm no longer on the board of HRC, but, they did a lot of work to elevate conversations. And I know with their new leadership, they've been able to bring in voices that have not been honored at the table in the past, in the way in which it's currently being honored now. And so that is affirming, and I'm hopeful that, as a result, we could all come together and make the world a better place, for us all.
Thank you, June. And June mentioned the new leadership at Human Rights Campaign, Alfonso David, the new president of Human Rights Campaign. I want to take this back to Jasmine, who, for the folks that are just joining us, Jasmine Canick is a political force and organizer based in Los Angeles. She's also one of the co-founders of the National Black Justice Coalition. And it's not lost on me that, at this particular moment in the movement, there are a number of national LGBTQ organizations that are now led by Black people. Alfonso David being one of them, Amani Rupert over at the National Center for Lesbian Rights, David Johns at National Black Justice Coalition, Earl Folks at the Center for Black Equity, and the head of the National LGBTQ Task Force. What does this moment mean to you, Jasmine, as somebody that has long invested in Black leadership and Black LGBTQ leaders? What does this moment mean, and what possibilities do you see with so many national LGBTQ organizations now having Black LGBTQ folks at the helm?
Oh, I think it's great. I was sitting here when June was speaking, and it made me think of something, how our community, we love to do the whole cancel culture thing today, right? And, I had talked to a lot of people about that because, I always say, you can't yell and scream for someone to change their opinions on something, and then when they do, you don't embrace them. Like you still, hate, you still being a hater. And so I was sitting here saying, okay, Jasmine, all right, if they, they got a Black person, they're trying to do something over there at HRC, you got to give them a little bit of credit. So I'm happy to hear that. One of the reasons I, for many, many years, was on the main stage. I just remember me and Keith Boyd, we used to go all around this country together. We were like on the main stage when it came to anything Black having to do with same gender loving people, right? And then I stepped back because I was being put in a box. Like the only thing in this world that as a Black woman I was good for was speaking on like Black queer issues. And I'm like, but no, I work in politics. I'm a political strategist. Like that's actually what I do. And so that's kind of why I step back and focus more on politics. So what I'm saying is that as Black people, we can do so many things. Yes, we can lead Black organizations. We can even lead white organizations. We can write for Black newspapers, and we can work for papers like the New York Times. Like we don't have to be put into this little black box of just doing Black things, And so it's great to see organizations who have traditionally overlooked Black people now have Black leadership, where hopefully just because you have Black leadership does not mean that it's good and that, Black people are being centered. Let's keep it real. But we hope that with this Black leadership, Black folks and their issues are being centered at these organizations in a way that it hasn't been in the past. I think that this 2021, and I can remember back to, let's just say in 2000, there has definitely been a lot of change, right? We are definitely more visible than we've ever been. And that's a great thing. I just want to make sure that it's not, I don't know, as I always tell people, I don't need lip service. I'll need to be, on your mailer or on your website smiling. What our communities need is actual resources. We need actual work being done in our communities. We don't want to just fill your diversity quota. We don't want to just be the shiny, colorful, faces in your brochure. And so as long as these organizations are, doing that hard, I know it's hard work because I've sat on boards and I know you got board members that don't want to budge, but as long as they're doing that hard work and they're making those demands, I'm all for it and I'm happy for them. And I'm happy that they're in that space. I mean, there are people that want to be in that space, that want to lead those fights, and good for them. It's great. I mean, I was telling somebody recently, like, hey, I'm happy NBJC is still around. Yay. These are so many Black organizations, right, that don't make it, that after 2 or 3 or 5 years, they're gone. And so I'm happy to see NBJC is still one of the organizations that is around, because I think it's important and I think it's relevant. And as it was when we did it, I think it's just as relevant and important, probably more so today.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. In our remaining minutes, I want to give everybody an opportunity to reflect on, sort of the state of the movement. Not just the first 100 days or beyond the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration, who've made some pretty significant commitments to our communities, but to reflect on this particular moment. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. There is still anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism and violence that does not make folks in our communities feel safe or seen or heard or like they belong. So we have a significant number of challenges that we're up against, but I want to give everyone a moment to just sort of reflect on the state of the movement. And we're going to do a round robin to close it out. We're going to start with Nick.
Yes. So, for me, I guess in closing, I feel like for me, I think it's really important to remember, Black lives, trans lives, Asian lives. There are still so many disenfranchised and like underrepresented folks who continue to be, murdered. I mean, I don't have another word, and that's the reality that we live in. And I think that I hope what we've gained from this last year is that we're going to be better about collaborating and working together as communities and fight for all of us together that have been so invisible and so neglected in our society. And I think that in a white supremacist society, what the aim has always been is to suppress all of us and oppress all of us so that we don't work together, because they know if we do, when we do, we're stronger than them, and I think that's something that I'm now really realizing and working towards, reaching out to all of, my Black and brown siblings and my trans siblings and all of the people in the AAPI community, that we all have to work together in unity, because that's how I think we're going to really achieve the change that we're looking for. So I invite all of you to, stay connected after this, because I would love to work with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Nicholas? Any reflections on the state of the movement?
Yeah, I feel like as always, I'm kind of like bouncing back between like the super pessimistic worldview and this attempt to really hold a strong dream of the future. I think we've seen there's just so many terrible things happening right now that the news cycle is really kind of dominating our focus. I know in my work as a communications strategist, I talk with a lot of organizations across the country, And I know Asian American led organizations especially have like surge of support after the Atlanta shooting, but then that support was very quickly deemed to be unsustainable. And now all of them are like, okay, we have this money that will probably never come again. And like, how do we do anything with this? How can we plan for the future with this? And in my conversations with organizations, like with Black-led organizations, it's like, a similar thing happened last year, is that a surge of support came and then it left. And, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the occupation of Palestine quite prominently. And now it feels like it's still like talked about, but it's definitely not dominating the news cycle. And I'm worried that like other people are just kind of like moving on to the next terrible thing that is happening. I know. But really do believe that like solidarity is the only way to move forward, and hyperlocal organizing cannot be neglected. I think finding like your people who can focus deep locally and create that really long-term work that exists outside of the news cycle is really important. And like, it's not just about Black and Asian solidarity. It's also about like, how are we organizing in solidarity with Indigenous communities to like end settler colonialism and repatriate and rematriate land, not just like to help them, but because all of our lives become better when we do that. How are we making sure that we're working with Latinx and Arab and Pacific Islander folks? And I will say, I know a lot of Asian Americans don't work with Pacific Islander folks and shouldn't be throwing around AAPI like it means, like it actually is a reflection of their work. And so what are Asian Americans, especially those in Hawaii, doing to support Native Hawaiian sovereignty? And how are we supporting transnational Pacific Islanders living in the domestic United States? So I think these are all like big questions, and I'm often pessimistic about them, but we're only going to get through this if we ground it in that vision of a future that we have the courage to dream about.
Thank you, Nicholas. June, your thoughts on the state of the movement?
Yeah, so visibility is very powerful. Role models are really powerful. Having Vice President Harris is, I have an 11-year-old granddaughter, and, just to have an example of what, she can become is, just so amazing. And so like, I'm hopeful that with this administration, we could see some change and some connection come through us and come, be made as a result of that. And, there is just so much healing to be done, so much work to be done. And I don't want to hold or feel as though I need to hold any more than is my responsibility. And so that's why connecting arms and connecting missions with other folks is really so important for us to do, because like nobody is perfect at all of the things that need to be worked on, all of the things that need to be said, and all of the ways in which we need to heal and navigate a really complex world. So, it is around having more of these conversations, more of these dialogues, challenging ourselves to be uncomfortable, and getting beyond this entitlement piece of it, and obviously working through holding our white and our white community to the fire to do better and to make change around the power dynamic that exists in the world, and particularly in this country, I think it's a lot of work to be done, but I'm hopeful that we can make some progress with those things.
Thank you, June. And Jasmine?
Okay. So the state of the movement, I guess for me, I would say in one word, it's inspiring. I would say that the struggle continues, and that, everyone needs to find their role and get into it. Like everyone's not gonna have a starring role. Some people are gonna be in the supporting roles, but there are roles for everyone. There are so many issues out there that need to be addressed, that need us to work on them. I believe that it is definitely our responsibility to leave this world in a much better place than the way we found it. We owe that to the younger generations that are coming. And so I just encourage people to find out what drives their passion and to get involved in that in some way. The movement will embrace you. We need people. There are different areas, whether it's criminal justice reform or it's, working on some other, civil rights, women's rights, trans equality, whatever. Just find something and get involved. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. And thank you to all my fellow co-panelists. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thanks to all of you. You all give me hope. You all give me great hope, and I have a feeling that I'm not alone. I have a feeling that the folks that are streaming this conversation right now, I think you all are radiating hope back into the world at a time where a lot of folks need as much hope as they can get. What also gives me hope are people like Karine Jean-Pierre, who stepped to the White House press briefing podium for the first time and led a press conference as the principal deputy White House press secretary, the second Black woman ever, first time in 30 years, and also the first Black lesbian to step to that podium. And so that gives me hope. My day job is at AARP, where I lead our national LGBTQ affairs work and partnering with organizations like the Center for Black Equity and Human Rights Campaign and CMI Research and Freddie Mac to do a national Black LGBTQ survey, over 18,000 participants in that survey, giving us the kind of data we need to center Black LGBTQ lives in our work, and to do so in a way that doesn't leave older adults out in the cold. And so that gives me hope. And I hope that we inspired a whole lot more hope for everyone that is watching. I want to thank the Washington Blade team for organizing this nifty conversation. I want to thank all of you for watching. Don't forget to tune in next week with the Blade for a discussion on Pride around the world, hosted by Blade International News Editor Michael LeVers. I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte from AARP, saying thank you until next time.